On today's podcast, we have a couple of things we're going to be going over today. One of them is some new alleged information about Sam, one of the missing hikers up here in northern BC in the Redfern Lake area. We're also going to be discussing some lightweight hot tents, whether or not they work up here. And we also have a new cartridge to discuss. It's the 7mm Backcountry. Welcome to the Buick Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Sheldon Marion, and on this podcast, we dive deep into the outdoors. We discuss hunting and fishing techniques, give you tips and tricks, tell stories, and everything in between to help you enjoy the outdoors. This podcast is brought to you by Northbound Gear. If you've been around here for a while, you would have seen that I pretty well exclusively wear Northbound Gear pants, whether it's the Adventure water resistant and cut resistant pants or the waterproof jeans. They're just excellent stand-up gear. They have those pants. They also have some summer pants as well that zip off into shorts. They have jackets, things for men and women, and they also have a bunch of accessories as well. If you want to check those guys out, they're at northboundgear.co. And for you guys listening and watching this, if you use the promo code Sheldon15 at checkout, you'll receive 15% off your order, and that's including the sale items. Also, with Northbound Gear, they partner up with One Tree Planted, so for every purchase, you also plant a tree. So head over to northboundgear.co, check those guys out, use the promo code Sheldon15 to receive 15% off, and get yourself some good gear. Hey everyone, welcome to another Buick Outdoors podcast. If you're new around here, my name is Sheldon Marion, and recently we got some new information about one of the missing hikers up here in northern BC. The hiker's name was Sam, who went missing out in the Redfern Lake area. And it's a lot of alleged information that we're getting, but it comes from somebody that was a part of the search and rescue. Basically, what they were saying after they talked to Sam's family is that what kind of started this off, and it's kind of what I was predicting. Sam auditioned for the Alone series, and he was turned down. They said you don't have enough experience, and they turned him away. And I think that kind of set in motion for him to go out and do his own little survival type thing without filming it, basically. Also, another thing that I heard was that where Sam's camp was, looking at Google Maps, it's about 400 meters from the trailhead itself. So when you look where the trailhead for Redfern Lake trail is, the road kind of comes down like this. It comes to like an abandoned lease looking deal, and then it veers off to the side, and that's where the trail is. And if you look to the right, a couple hundred yards away, there's a creek that has a little fork in it. Now, if you go up this side, the creek has a bunch of water in it. If you go on this leg, it's dry. I might have that backwards, but regardless, there's a creek that forks. One side is dry, one side's there's still water running in it. And apparently, that's where he was camped at. Now, we don't have 100% reassurance that that is where he was staying at. But things are kind of pointing in that direction. The guy I was talking to, they're going to be going back in there this spring once all the snow is all melted. And they're going to search for his campsite, and they're also going to search for his bike to see if they can find it. When they were there, they were talking to the search and rescue. They asked them if they went up that way and searched, and they said that they did a flyover of it a couple of times, and they didn't see anything. So they didn't go in there on foot. And, it might sound a little iffy, or you might want to bash the search and rescue, but really, if they're going in there with the thought that they're looking for somebody who's lost and wants to be found, if you're in a helicopter and you're, say, at 300 feet, roughly, because you have to fly over top of the trees and stuff, otherwise, you're going to be flying into the trees. But, at 300 feet, when you're looking down, if somebody has just even a makeshift shelter, like a lean-to or something like that, it just looks like a pile of sticks. Because essentially that is what it is. You have, if you're doing a lean-to, typically you find a good solid branch in a tree. You just put one branch this way, like one tree, and then you just put a bunch of sticks off to the side, and then you put spruce boughs all over it, or birch bark or something like that, for a little bit of insulation and protection from snow and rain and water and all that. And I mean, really, even if you walk up onto one, it looks like a pile of sticks. There, unless you have like an orange tarp or a red jacket, or something to identify yourself with, it just looks like a brush pile. So even though they did fly over it a few times, uh, it doesn't it doesn't surprise me that they didn't see it. When it comes to like even his bike and stuff, if you have a couple armloads of spruce boughs on top of like a bright red Honda bike, it's going to disappear. Like, you will not be able to see it. Also, if you're a guy who's trying not to be found, there's a good chance that you're not going to be out waving your arms, or if you're hearing a bunch of helicopters and stuff, you're not going to really want to be seen. That also comes, what comes up in my conversation too, is why he potentially moved. He might have been really close to the initial search area, and with all the activity and helicopters and stuff, that might have been when he actually moved his site to be further away. Especially if it was getting slightly chilly. If you're gonna want to have a fire to warm up. If they're flying drones around, or helicopters, or just people in the general area, you can smell smoke from a very long ways away. So if he didn't want to be found, and he just kind of gathered up his stuff before the snow fell and just hiked up the dry creek, which again makes sense. If the creek is dry, it's very hard to leave any boot prints or anything like that. It's very hard to be detected. So if he just packed up his stuff, walked up the dry creek bed, and made up camp again a little bit further away, say instead of 400 yards from the trailhead, he went a mile up, it's going to be hard to see him, see any heat signatures, see any smoke, smell smoke, especially if he has just a small fire inside his shelter, because that's what it sounds like is what happened. Is he had his fire inside a shelter, and his shelter actually caught on fire. But with that all being said, it is alleged information, until the guys actually go back out there this spring and do like their own little follow-up investigation. That's when we'll know for sure where he was camped at. They're going to be looking obviously for his bike, because it sounds like nobody's found his bike yet. Where a camp has been set up, and it's going to be pretty easy to find a camp that's been set up, especially when he's there for 2 to 3 weeks, kind of a deal. Also, they're going to look for a burnt shelter, and yeah, I'm hopeful that they find it and they're able to take some pictures of it and send them to me, and then we can actually for sure say like this is what happened. But until then, it's all speculation. I don't really want to bash the guy too much. Like, what he did was, I mean, like, let's face it, what he did was actually kind of cool. I just don't like the way he went about it. If he would have, called up his family and said, hey, you know what? I auditioned for a loan. They said no. They want me to have more experience, so I'm going to go on this weird little trip that you guys may or may not understand. And I'm just going to go out and I'm just going to see if I can live in the bush for whatever, a few weeks, or until I freeze myself out or whatever. But this is where I'm going. It sounds like there was service somewhere kind of close to it. So even if you just, once a week drove up to the highway, sent his mom a message or whatever, and said, hey, no, checking in, I'm all good, and then went back and did his thing. I mean, like, you're still out there doing your survival type deal, and you're just keeping in contact. What he did, if it's what he did, it's
man, it's not cool. Having uh, all that search and rescue efforts and everybody worried, and like he didn't even tell his family too. So like his family thought he was dead. You know what I mean? Like it just, yeah, going about the way he did it was just, man. If you want to do that kind of thing, all the power to you. Like I've done somewhat similar things before in my wall tent. But I was checking in with people daily. I let them know what was going on, where I was, what I was doing, and like I still had like the time of my life out there, even though it was -40 and I was in a tent with a stove. It was, you struggled every single day that you were there, and I didn't quite freeze to death. But there was a couple mornings you wake up and like you had to strike a match real quick to warm up. But I mean, it was still fun. It was still exciting, even though I was in cell phone service and I still contacted people. I was still out there in the bush doing it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, um, it'll be kind of curious to see what happens if it does turn out that he was camped out right there. Because to me, he should be held accountable for some of the costs associated with that, because he wasn't a missing person. He wasn't a lost hiker. He chose to disappear, kind of a thing. Unless he can say that he was half crazy or something, or I don't know. But in my mind, you know, he went out there, again, allegedly, he went out there fully knowing what he was doing. And yeah, it caused a huge uproar and a bunch of search and rescue efforts to come out. And like the helicopter bills alone would be in the tens of thousands of dollars, let alone all the manpower and stuff. So, I mean, like, man, I don't know. He wasted a ton of money that should have been put towards something else. But, anyways, that's my story about Sam and the update for him. The other thing I want to talk to you guys about today was lightweight hot tents. Uh, I bought one this summer because I was going to use it here this fall and this winter. Or no, I bought it this spring because when it came in the mail, I went out into the yard and I just tried to pitch it in my yard. Unfortunately, though, up here in the north, our ground, it doesn't just get like cold, it freezes solid where it's almost like concrete. It is so extremely hard. And I tried to pitch that tent, and the way you do it is you stake down 4 of the stakes, then you put your center pole up, and then you stake down the other 4, because I think there's 8 in total that you have to do. But trying to drive the tent pegs into the ground was just not working. I think I got one to go in about 2 inches maybe, and that just, it wasn't enough to keep tension on that tent. So I rolled it up and I put it away, and I just didn't really think much of it. And then I was going to use it again this winter just to do some overnight camping trips and all that stuff. But that was in, I want to say, in April, and we had some warm weather before I even tried to put the stakes in. And it's like, it's almost impossible to find a spot where you can actually drive your stakes in and have them stay in. We do have some areas where you can get those tent pegs to go into the ground and stay in there, but that's typically around kind of like mossy, marshy type areas, and that stuff, it just rips out. Another issue that I've had with some tents is like my Cabela's Bighorn 3. I recently just sold that, and with that one, it was a half decent tent. The vents were quite large, but I mean, if you taped them up and stuff like that, it wasn't too bad. And that's what I had when I was out on the trap line. Uh, that was a few years ago now, but I spent like a month in that thing out by Cecil Lake. And with that, the way you pitch it, you have one main beam that kind of goes over the top of the tent, and then in the front and the back is two like A-frames. And once they're set up into the tent, the way you keep them standing up is by hooking them up to pegs that are in the ground, and you use guidelines, and it's tension to keep them standing up. And with that, again, if you find the right spot, you can drive those stakes in and it's not too bad. But in order to find that right spot, it's such a pain in the butt. And then especially up here too, some years we don't get overly too much snow, but other years you go into the bush and you got like 3 or 4 feet of snow. And like you gotta dig all the way down to the bottom. With a lot of these hot tents, a lot of them don't come with a floor, so it's not too bad when it gets hot in there and it kind of melts. Things will get a little bit wet. But the other ones where they have the sewn in floors, they're nice to keep you off the dirt, off the grass, and off the snow kind of thing. But when you have your heater in there going, everything gets hot, and what'll end up happening is your floor gets hot to the point where all the snow underneath melts, and then after whatever, a day, that snow, that water, it kind of refreezes, and when it freezes your floor right to the ground. So when you get ready to pack up and leave, you have to let your fire burn out. You have to let your stove be cool to the touch so then you can actually disassemble everything. But when that happens, all that water that was underneath freezes. It freezes your floor to the ground, and then when you go to pack up, you essentially like rip the floor off, and you kind of destroy your tent. Sometimes you can get away with just like pulling it up and just breaking off big chunks of grass and moss and ice. But then you have these massive blocks of snow and ice. And I had to do that with the Cabela's tent the one time. And what I ended up doing is I took it home. Thankfully, I still had somewhat of a shop where I was living at the time out in Buick. And I got the wood stove going in there. And I just kind of like hung it up and just let the ice and crap melt and drip off. And I swept it up and threw it outside. But if you don't have that, you just have like a shed or a regular old size house kind of deal. It's pretty hard to set up like a 12 by 14 tent in your basement somewhere to let it thaw out kind of a deal. So it can become quite a bit of a pain. Um, but with like the hot tents too, depending on where you go, like up here, it's so incredibly tough to get into some areas because like we don't plow out the roads to a lot of places or even parking lots and stuff. And even if they do plow out the parking lot, in Inga, we knew the guy that was grading the road, and we kind of made a deal with him. We just paid him a few bucks there to go and grade the one spot for us to go and park our trucks to go ice fishing. And I tried to set up the Cabela's tent in there, but having to peg it down into the dirt, it just wouldn't work because there it was like pretty well hard packed gravel, and it would not go in. So when I tried to take my stakes from my ice fishing tent, and they're just like big augers almost, and I tried to auger that into the ground, and again, that didn't work either. And yeah, it's the same thing with your small lightweight hot tents. Uh, Anywhere you go, you have to stake it into the ground, and there is a way to stake them in to the snow. You dig like a pocket out, you bury your stakes in there, and then you drive your stakes in there, and then you cover them up with a bunch of snow, or you put like a log or a rock over top of them. But it, it's just a pain. Plus, with the small lightweight stoves, I even talked to the guy that owns Pomali. He said he was doing like some R&D testing and stuff, and the one tent that he took out, it was like their top of the line tent at the time. This was probably about 2 years ago, and his big Pomali stove. It's like a big collapsible stove kind of deal. And he said it was -20, and he would not recommend that at all. He goes, I almost froze to death, and like this is not meant for anything colder than -20. And I kind of laughed because at the time I was like, well, up here it warms up to minus 20. Because that's when I was really looking into hot tents. And like, I just could not justify spending the kind of money for that tent and his stove. It was like almost $1,000, I want to say. And then after talking to him, it just solidified like, yeah, I really don't see myself using one of these. Because for me, it was to replace the Cabela's tent. It's smaller, more compact, doesn't take up nearly as much room. The wood stove weighs like 3 pounds compared to my big wood stove that I was using in the Cabela's tent, where that thing weighs, I think, 80 or 90 pounds. So, to me, it was going to be a great purchase to use, but then after doing my own little research and talking to the dude that actually owns Pomali and has his own tents and his own stoves, and he actually designs them himself, like, they don't work up here in the north. Setting them up can be difficult, but then after that, if it turns minus 20 or minus 30, uh, you know, they just don't throw enough heat, and they don't hold enough heat to stay warm. Like their tents, they're lightweight, uh, pretty well plastic shells. There's no insulation at all in them. Uh, you can get other ones that are kind of freestanding. Was it One Tigress or Nature Hike maybe that builds them, where it's like a freestanding dome style tent, and that looks like that might work a little bit better. But then I don't know if there's a floor in it, because if there's a floor, you'd be able to just throw your stuff in there to kind of hold it down. But if there's no floor, you would still have to stake it in so it doesn't move. Another one is I can't remember their name. If I seen them, I'd know them. Alaska tents, maybe, or Alaskans. They're a great big yellow or orange tent, and the way they work is that they're freestanding with an external frame, and then also it's like a tent inside of a tent. So in that way, you heat up the main tent that you're sitting in, but there's also this 3-inch pocket of air kind of a deal that stays somewhat insulated from that other tent shell being on the outside. And those things, there's a lot of people that swear by them, that use them a lot, but those ones also aren't exactly lightweight. I want to say the inner tent is a real thick material, and then the outer tent is kind of like that plastic stuff that like these lightweight hot tents use. But it's just to hold in that warm air or to slow it down from escaping real quick, kind of a deal. For those, you'd have to look into them for it to make sense. Me, I'm just talking like a blabbering idiot right now about them. But yeah, those ones seem to work good. But then for us up here in the north, for the most part, you gotta use like a canvas tent with an internal frame. Doesn't matter if you get it from Deluxe Wall Tents or Canvas Tent Shop or whatever, but those seems to be the go-to for up north. Because those you can put them pretty well anywhere. You set up the frame, you throw the tent over top, you stand it up, and away you go. If you have like the floor liner, they usually clip into place kind of thing, or you just roll it out, and they seem to be, top notch, the best there is. And then also that canvas, it's real thick material, it holds a lot of heat. The downside of canvas tents though is they're so incredibly heavy. You have the monstrous size canvas, and then all the poles to go with it, and then the time it takes to set it all up. It can be a bit of a pain. And then some of them too, well, the majority of them, they have it where you can just use like your log frames. But even with that, you still have to cut 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trees down, and you make like your A-frame for both sides, and then you run your side beams across to attach your walls to. Oh, and then one more log for the ridge pole up top. So I mean, like that takes even longer time than the frames. But the good thing with those though is you can go pretty well anywhere. Even if you want to camp out on the lake in the middle of winter, you can, because it's an external frame. Everything just stands up. You know, it's good to go. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't really think the lightweight hot tents work up here. And you know, I've tried. I've really put in an effort. You know, spring, late spring, summer, and then like early fall, they would work good. But other than that, you know, to use them what I intended it for, it just it did not work for me. And unfortunately, it was pretty well a waste of, what the heck was it, like $130 for that tent. The stove, you know, it wasn't an entire waste. I did a review on that stove that I bought. I can't remember which one I got. Might have been a Beaver. Yeah, Beaver collapsible wood stove made of titanium kind of thing. It's actually a pretty decent stove, and it does throw off a lot of heat. But man, if it was minus 20 or so, you'd I don't know if you'd really want to trust your life to that thing. But oh well. On to the other subject is that new 7mm cartridge. So we have a new 7mm. It is the 7mm Backcountry. And on my computer here, I got a bunch of stuff pulled up here because I was looking at different ballistics and everything like that. And like basically the 7mm Backcountry, uh, essentially they took a regular old 7mm to a certain degree. They changed it up slightly. I haven't really looked into that overly too much. But they basically took it, and instead of using a brass casing, they're using like steel casing, kind of. It's a peak alloy case, whatever they call it. You know, I don't know, some new patented metal that they're using for the casing. That way, they're able to put more powder in it to increase the pressure, increase the chamber pressure. Because if you're using brass, brass can only hold so much pressure before it like splits, or the where the rim is there on the bottom, that can blow out. It can blow out like the primer and all that stuff. But apparently with this new, whatever it is, alloy steel kind of a deal, it holds that pressure in a lot more. So instead of blowing up at 50,000 psi, it blows up at 80,000 psi, or whatever the numbers are. I'm just a stupid redneck spitballing numbers at you. I don't actually know the pressures. But you know, looking at all these new cartridges and stuff like that, you know, it's getting to the point where if you know exactly what feet per second that you want, there's kind of getting to be something for you in that range. Because before, you know, we had like 7mm Remington Magnum 280, 280 Ackley Improved, 7mm STW. That one's been around for a while. What else was there? That was kind of it. And now you got like the 7PRC 28 Nosler. You know, like we're getting to the point where there's so many to choose from. Well, now we have the 7mm WSM as well. You know, like there's so many cartridges and calibers and stuff that you can pick from now. It's getting to the point where it's almost a bit ridiculous, because even like this 7mm Backcountry, if you look at the ballistics, let's see if I can find them here. If you compare the ballistics using a 24-inch barrel and a 170 grain bullet, you know, at the muzzle, it's 3,100 feet per second. At 100 yards, it's 2997, so we'll call it 3,000. Then if you look at like 7mm Remington Magnum, 168 grain Burger Hybrid, the velocity at the muzzle, 2800. At 100 yards, 2700. So it kind of beats it out there. It's pretty good. And then same thing with like the energy. Energy at 100 yards, basically 3,400 foot-pounds. 7mm Remington Magnum with 168s instead of 170s. 2,700 foot-pounds. So it beats it out pretty good there. But when you look at something like a 28 Nosler, which again, it's basically a brand new caliber. It's only been around a couple of years. You look at a 28 Nosler with 180 grain bullets. Let's see, velocity at 100 yards, 2906. Velocity out of the backcountry, 2997. Go back to the 28 Nosler. The energy at 100 yards, 3376. Backcountry, go to the energy, 100 yards, 3389. So, I mean, like, it's getting to the point where we're just kind of stepping on each other's toes almost with all these new calibers. And especially like the 7mm. For whatever reason, like, I don't like the 7mm. The 7mm Remington Magnum, to me, it's a waste of good ammo. If you want to use it for deer, antelope, maybe sheep and goat kind of a thing, it's great. But you hear so many people using it for moose and bears and stuff, and like, I can tell you from first-hand experience, I have nothing but bad things to say about the 7mm when it comes to bigger animals. Not too bad with elk, great for deer. Same with like antelope, I haven't shot an antelope, but I mean like antelope size, like a whitetail or mule deer, I'm sure it would just wipe them out. Same with like goats and sheep, it's great for that. But when I hear people taking a 7mm for a bear hunt or a moose hunt, I just cringe. And like, I can see why, from first-hand use, why a lot of guide outfitters just outright ban 7MMs from coming into their guiding territories, because they've seen more wounded moose get away from a 7mm. Now, is that because it's the Remington Magnum and it's in that sweet spot where it's not fast enough or not slow enough? It's right in that area where it kind of sort of kills, but not very efficiently. Where, say you had something like this backcountry, it shoots a lot faster and hits harder. Maybe this might be one of the best calibers or best cartridges around for moose. I don't know. It's brand new. I've seen one guy shot an elk with it. One guy got, I think, a mule deer with it, and like, it works for that. But that's also marketing. If I was federal and I came out with a new cartridge, I'd tell you that this is the absolute best of the best, yada yada yada, whatever. And that's essentially what they're doing right now. Is they're saying, this is going to revolutionize, ammunition. This new alloy, this new steel. It's gonna, the new case technology is gonna change the game, kind of a thing. And the way I can see that is if they do essentially what Nosler did. But I mean, like, if you look at this, it's kind of like this 7mm is kind of identical to a 28 Nosler. Even like the trajectories and stuff, they're slightly different, but they're close enough to call them almost the same thing. But I can see it being somewhat catching to some people, because it's instead of like a monstrous bullet like a 28 Nosler, even that, it's not monstrous. Like, it's a good size, but it's a regular size casing. If they're kind of targeting like the short barrel guys, like the 20-inch barrels, because like the 20-inch barrels, you kind of get the same velocity and energy of a 20-inch barrel as you would out of a 24-inch barrel using like a regular 7mm Remington. So I mean, that it's somewhat appealing. But again, this is almost identical to a 28 nozzler, which kind of took off, but not really. But then with this backcountry, if they take this 7mm backcountry with a new, steel casing and stuff like that, and they use it as like the introduction to more calibers, like the 25 backcountry, the 30 backcountry, 338 backcountry, it would be appealing. The problem that I see though is like, again, it's almost identical to the nozzler, which is already out there. So I mean, like, to me, I'm basically like an old school guy. I just stick to the tried and true, what still works, what works great. 300 Win Mag, 30-06, 308, 270. I mean, 22. I don't need the 17, even though I have one. I bought one. I got on board with it. I used it for quite a few years. And then I kind of got bored of it. Plus, it was just expensive to shoot. Since then, I've bought like 3 more 22s or maybe 4 more. All this new technology is coming out. The new calibers, not calibers, but new cartridges are coming out. And like, it looks fine and dandy and great. But the next rifle that I buy is probably going to be an old Swedish thing that's just kind of cool, or it's going to be a 308. Just, it's the simplicity. The simplicity, the. If I go to Walmart, I can buy bullets for it. If I go to Canadian Tire, if I stop in some mom and pop shop in Fort Nelson, there'll be 308 bullets. 7mm Backcountry, they came out and they said, I think next week they'll start shipping bullets. And, that's fine and dandy as long as they kind of keep up. But what I worry about the 7mm Backcountry, it'll be like the 7mm Winchester Short Magnum, where it just, they put in a pile of money and all this stuff into research and development and marketing and all that, and then it just falls flat. That's where with this though, kind of going after the short barrel market kind of makes sense, because there'll be like a small portion of guys out there that'll really want one of these, but will be enough to keep the brand alive, or like the cartridge alive, kind of a thing. Uh, man, we're getting to the point now where I think we're just trying to reinvent the wheel, and it just, to me, it's not working. Like, we have so many calibers around 7mm, around like this weird pocket of ballistics. Like, now we have 7mm Backcountry, 7PRC, 7mm Weatherby, 7mm STW, 28 Nosler, 7mm Winchester Short Magnum, 280, 280 Ackley Improved, and it's all like 2,800 feet per second to 3,500 feet per second. And in this little pocket there is a caliber for like everybody's wants and needs. The 7mm Backcountry, it might be like just like the last one that you could potentially make until you get into some, I don't know, some weird thing like the 7mm 300 Weatherby or something like that. I don't know, the 7mm 338. Like, there'll be some oddball wildcats that you could potentially make, or like what they did here, just keep increasing pressures. I don't know. We're in a weird position when it comes to these new calibers, and like, I don't know. I'm hard to impress with all this new stuff, because I mean, nowadays it seems like they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that it sticks. This 7mm Backcountry, it might stick around a little bit longer than like the Winchester Short Mags or the Nozzlers, just because there is that one very specific group of people where you're going after the short barrels, and the short barrels that are they're kind of designed and made for suppressors, because then that suppressor takes up that extra length. So, and it kind of makes it like a 24-inch barrel. So, I mean, there is a crowd for it, but it's very, very small. Also, one big thing that people were talking about is the reloading factor of it. I I read somewhere that this new steel might not be able to be used reloading it, but I don't know, something to do with like the stress of it or the hardness of it. I I don't know. I'm not a reloader, but if that's the case, this thing might fall flat on its face if you can't reload for it, or all the casing is a one-shot use only. That might get them into some trouble there with the reloading community, anyways. But for guys like me, it doesn't matter. Also, the rifles that are kind of getting chambered in it too. It's Weatherby, Horizon, Savage Arms, Gunwork, Seeking's Precision. I don't even know, Giselle, Pure Precision, Christensen Arms, Proof Research. Pretty well like expensive rifles, other than Savage Arms. I bet you might be able to get one from Savage Arms for, I don't know, $1,000 maybe. And then the Christensen Arms, if it comes out in the Mesa, that's, what is it, $1,200 rifle. But other than that, everything else, I'm kind of guessing, is like a $3,000 and up rifle. So for guys like me who, I like my, you know, Savage Arms, Weatherby Vanguards, Ruger Hawkeye, M77s, Ruger Americans. I like my guns that are like $600 to $1,200, maybe $1,500. We'll stretch it a little. So I mean, like if it came out on just like a regular Savage Access or a Ruger M77 package, and it was $1,500, okay, I might buy one to try it. But if I have to go to Gunworks, and I'm just saying Gunworks because the rifles are kind of going across the screen here, I'm not going to spend $5,000 on that, or a Proof, or I don't know if Fierce is making them yet. But like all these precision rifles, I don't want to spend $3,000 just to try it to see if I like it. But I don't know. If they would have made it, I'd have to check on Savage Arms. But if they would have made it available in more popular rifles for like the average guys, like myself and a lot of people that are watching this, that might again would help the new cartridge. But it's designed specifically mainly for short barrels, for suppressors, for precision firearms. I can't see this sticking around, and especially if that if they are designed where you can't reload them. The guys that are shooting a lot of this precision stuff, they reload their stuff for a reason, because they like to tweak and modify. And if you take this cartridge and you can only shoot it once, your target audience that you're trying to sell this to is going to just drop it at launch. If they go, oh, you can't reload for it, I don't want it. And they're going to go back to the 28 nozzlers. They're going to go back to the STWs or the PRCs now. That seems to be a big one for these precision guys. But yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think about this new 7mm, and if what I'm saying actually kind of makes sense with this new thing. Because to me, like, there's so many options available now where, like, you pretty well pick a number and that's what you want and that's what you go with. For me, 3,000 feet per second, good enough. I can pick, a ton of calibers that hit that 3,000 feet per second now. And then it kind of comes down to if you like 7mm or if you're more of a 30 caliber kind of guy. It's, I don't know, you're starting to split hairs at this point when, yeah, getting real nitpicky. But I'm sure it will be around for a little bit. But you know what, 7mm, WSM was around for a little bit too. Now you can't even find a rifle caliber or a chambered in it. But yeah. Anyways, guys, that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Hope you enjoyed listening to me blabber on there a little bit and venting out. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the little talking points. And if you like this kind of a little bit better than just having one thing that I talk about for an hour, and it's 3 or 4 different things that we kind of go and talk about, let me know in the comments. And yeah, we'll make it hopefully a little bit more enjoyable. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoy it. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll catch you on the next one.